And now we cross over to our Ocean for global insight and an in-depth look at important developments in world affairs.
Thanks very much, Morgan. It is indeed time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. As countries continue to roll out vaccinations, some of the world's major tourist hotspots have begun accepting international travellers again and introducing vaccinated travel schemes and quarantine-free travel bubbles. But the coronavirus is proving very difficult to shake off, with nervousness remaining around new variants and reinfection cases. Will recovery in air travel be as simple as just simply loosening the borders? Today we speak with YEOMAN, Associate Professor of Tourism Futures at Victoria University of Wellington and co-editor of the Journal of Tourism Futures. We also have joining us again Marion Joppe, Professor of Hospitality, Food and Tourism Management at the University of Guelph. Thanks very much for joining us today. And well, let's start with you, Ian, joining us from New Zealand. Now, major Asian travel destinations, including Singapore, Thailand and Vietnam, they've been reopening their borders in recent weeks after some 20 months of restrictions and lockdowns due to the pandemic. And it looks like they'll implement ways to allow vaccinated travel inside their countries. What are some standard requirements or procedures for vaccinated travel bubbles, zones or lanes that we're starting to see?
Kia ora, and welcome from New Zealand. I think the tourism and hospitality sectors going forward face very major challenges because COVID-19's very much a live virus, a live animal. And very much there's this desire to open. So very much countries across the world have come up with restrictions and procedures in order to accept people into our country. We've got to remember many of the countries of Southeast Asia and the Pacific are very highly dependent upon tourism. And international tourism is very important for the economy. So without those tourists, we've seen a substantive drop. So in the terms of trying to reopen, many countries have come up with in the terms of number of procedures. And right at the heart of this is about only accepting vaccinated passengers. It's about pre-departure tests. We'll probably see arrival tests as well with saliva tests. And most airlines across the world are very much focusing on the IATA pass, which is basically saying in order to travel, you have to be vaccinated. So these are some of the basic basic requirements which most countries are introducing before passengers can arrive into their countries. However, with COVID-19, vaccines are fundamentally effective against stopping you going into hospital. They don't stop the virus. So we're still seeing tourists that will arrive into a destination and they will get COVID-19, and there's lots of implications with that. So what we've seen is destinations will open, destinations will close, and the typical one with that was when New Zealand had a travel bubble with Australia and it had operated for 85 days, 76 days of that travel bubble, there was lots of restrictions because of the number of cases that were happening in Australia. So you've got this hesitancy and this opening and closing that's going on.
Well, so Ian, would you say that fully vaccinated travel zones or travel bubbles, they might not, immediately jumpstart recovery for the travel industry then, based on this example?
Yes, that's probably the right example, because those that are traveling first are not fundamentally travelers traveling for the purpose of leisure. The main travelers that are going at the moment are those that are trying to reconnect with friends and family, and that type of connections. So destinations have opened, and we have seen resurgence in a number of countries in terms of traffic. If you look at the United States and if you look at Europe, but fundamentally travel to Southeast Asia or intercontinental travel has still got lots of boundaries. And what will probably happen now, they will open, but they may close at the same time, because the key issue, we talk about vaccination, is one of the problems is about travel advisories, and the other problems is about travel insurance, because most travel insurance is not covering COVID-19 in the terms of hospitalization, and it's also not covering in the terms of disruption to travel. So it's about the effectiveness of this. That's why many of the forecasts for the future of tourism are not talking about a complete recovery until around 2023, 2024, in the terms of levels of confidence, especially in the Asia-Pacific area.
And well, Marion, to bring you into the conversation, it seems like, well, it's not just about what countries are going to require from incoming tourists, but also pandemic control is something that tourists are going to consider as very important when they make their travel decisions, because they do want to feel safe wherever they are traveling to. Which countries do you think will be regarded right now as the rather safe zones? What do you think passengers are really going to prioritize when deciding on their travel options?
Well, certainly double vaccination. So does your country have a good vaccination rate? Are you doubly vaccinated? Possibly even the booster shot, because we're starting to see, Israel leading the way, but the United States has opened up with booster shots and others are going to follow. So even that may become a criteria. And then you will probably be looking at the infection rate and vaccination rate in the country you wish to visit. And this is where, North America and Europe and a few other countries like Korea have an advantage because of the high vaccination rate in those countries. They also tend to have good healthcare systems. And so all of those are considerations for travelers, and why it is so critical also that vaccines be made available to other countries in the world, because their tourism will not pick up unless they can see a much higher vaccination rate.
And Marion, well, myself included, many people around me, we've been saying, well, at least now we have the option to travel. But when you look at the ticket prices lately, it doesn't seem to be much of an option there. I mean, you're in Canada right now, and I was actually looking up some flight tickets to Toronto, and 2 months ago it cost around, it was quite cheap back then, it was around maybe $500 back in just a return ticket to Seoul, but now it's somewhere around $2,000. Why are ticket prices just soaring at the moment?
Well, it's a combination of reasons. One is the fact that airlines had to take out a lot of capacity, and they've been parking airplanes. They've retired a lot of wide-bodied airplanes, and similarly had to let a lot of their staff go. So now they're bringing them back as demand picks up. But you can't just turn a switch. To bring planes and staff back requires certification. So you have to go through training, you have to go through mechanical processes with the planes to ensure that they are up to standard again. So all of that takes time. And we have also seen that people are reluctant to go back to work. And so they're also dealing with this shortage of labor. And the way to entice them back is by increasing salaries. So you take all of that together, and you see significant increases in prices simply because they have to absorb these prices, these costs.
Now, Ian, as Mary mentioned, many airliners, they've been undergoing some problems, and some were undergoing very structural problems even before the pandemic hit. Do you think all businesses are going to be able to recover, or do you think there are certain travel sectors that are going to have to adapt to the new normal after the pandemic?
Without doubt, the travel and tourism industry has taken a big hit in the terms of disruption, because international tourism in 2020 was down around 74% globally. So the countries that are highly dependent upon tourism just cannot sustain it. So you're going to see a smaller tourism industry over the next 2 to 3 years, because the demand is not there, and because that demand is fundamentally going to be around domestic tourism, or within more developed economies rather than developing economies in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. There's going to be a lot of trouble. So you're going to see a transformation and changes. And fundamentally, you may say the end of tourism in some countries as labour forces migrate to other industries because tourism is not sustainable, especially in small island countries where they've previously had this over-dependency on tourism. So there's going to be big hits and changes going forward, and a very much about some restructuring and closure of business, especially in the next 2 to 4 years, because I don't expect full recovery till 2024, 2025.
Well, Ian, it does seem, though, that the luxury tourism sector, it's managed to weather the storm somewhat. They've actually been benefiting from the lockdown situation as people go on more exclusive forms of travel. What kind of trends do you see continuing?
Well, I think the luxury market is right at the top. With the luxury market, you can buy isolation. You can buy fundamentally your own bubble. So certain parts of the luxury industry have done very, very well. But even within that, it's taken a big hit because tourism fundamentally and its growth over the last 20 years has depended on a prosperous middle-class market. And that prosperous middle-class market going forward is going to be squeezed because prices are more expensive, inflation is higher. So in the terms of purchasing power, they just can't, they can't do it. So the big trends in the short term, in the terms of tourism, will be about visiting friends and relatives, and family tourism becomes very important. We're probably going to see a resurgence on your personal bubble, and this is probably about RVs and you in control of your own travel, you traveling in your own vehicle and doing that. The growth in tourism from a destination perspective is probably going to be more rural than urban. So, for example, Airbnb at the moment is selling more holiday lets in Cornwall, which is a rural destination, than compared to London. So we've got this renaissance or mindset about the outdoors and space and nature. The other big thing is COVID-19 is very much a dystopian situation or disruption. And when we have that, we tend to focus on hope and kindness and a utopia in the future. So the big focus across the world at the moment is to regenerate tourism through sustainability, through products and experiences that are benefits to the community and to the destination. So you're going to see more of this sustainability and ecotourism take off. But fundamentally, the big strength will be around VFRs and family. It's about space, and your own bubble is the core drivers of the core trends.
Well, so for now, international travel, unless it's necessary or unless it's to see family, for the time being, it does seem like it's still a bit of a hassle. It's also expensive. Marion, how long do you think it's going to take for the industry to recover fully or almost at the full capacity back at the levels that it was seeing before the pandemic hit?
Yeah, as Ian was saying, we're looking at 24, 25 before it will be fully recovered. Now, it'll vary by sector and also by market segment. As Ian suggested, the visiting friends and relative segment is coming back first, followed by the leisure segment. Business is going to be a bit slower because businesses have realized that a lot of things can be done via virtual meetings. Ultimately, the in-person meeting will be coming back. It's just going to take slower as people sort of reconsider travel options. Many businesses have cut their travel budgets as well. Because they've had many other costs to cope with. So you're going to see this variation in terms of what kind of travel and what segments. The domestic, as Ian said, is first, followed by the sort of surrounding countries, regional travel, and then finally, long last, will be the intercontinental. Now, from an airline perspective, you have to realize that they've always made their money with business travel and intercontinental. Those were sort of the huge profit centers, and these are the ones that are coming back slowest for them. So that is also why you're seeing prices go up, because they need to compensate for the changed configuration of many of the airplanes, where there are few or none that are first class and a reduced number of business seats.
Thank you. Well, that was YEOMAN, Associate Professor of Tourism Features at Victoria University of Wellington, and Marion Joppe, Professor of Hospitality, Food and Tourism Management at the University of Guelph. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having us.